25, season 2 of The Drop in the house.
25, season 2.
Coming in hot, MK, for the new year 2021. My new motto is New Year, New Gear. I have brand new Beats headphones.
Oh, yeah, I didn't even realize that.
Yes, shout out to Michelle for getting me these gorgeous new headphones over the holiday break.
And shout out to Lindbergh School District for my
for your
my
headset.
my Logitech headset. It's a little bit of a price difference, I'm sure.
I did
headphones
see those.
and mine.
Yes. I'm going to tell you right now. I am not picking mine up because I don't want to use that for sure.
Well, we'll see how it sounds after this episode.
But we will see. We will see. It is a new year, new season, 2021. Although MK, I feel like the 10-yard dumpster that 2020 was in just got expanded to a 20-yard dumpster for 2021, because people naively seem to think that when the calendar flips, everything goes back to normal, and we are far from that now. It has been quite a lot going on since our last episode. We've seen an insurrection in our country's capital. We've seen a pandemic that continually rages on. Just so many things going on right now that it is good to get back in the studio and do this with you. It's something that I've been looking forward to. Our first guest that's coming up today is absolutely fantastic. But a couple of things going on here in New York. I know that we are starting a vaccine rollout this past week. I was lucky to get my first shot on Friday after school.
And I'm going Wednesday.
And you're going Wednesday. I have to say I was pleasantly surprised at how well done it was down at Jones Beach. I know the first day they had it last week was a little chaotic for some people. I was able to get in the following day, and I got in and right out with no problem.
That's good. That's great. I'm hoping when I go in, mine's going to be a little different. I'm going to Jamaica, Queens, to a high school, not Jones Beach. So we'll see how my story ends up this week. But who knows?
Let's see. But I was impressed with how easily it was rolled out, and I'm hoping it continues that way. Hopefully the light is at the end of the tunnel. We still have to take precautions. That's my biggest concern, is that everyone's going to start getting these shots, and then their guard's going to drop. We still have to kind of be resilient and just see this thing all the way through.
Until it's everybody gets it.
We'll see. School is still going strong. We are still staying as normal as we possibly can. I don't know how it's going for you. I'm trying to keep my fingers crossed.
It's funny because I feel like there's I think we know that this year has been a tough year, but I feel like the last, since we came back from break, I feel like it's been a tough go. I think I feel like it's like people are exhausted with this year and the way that it's operated, and I feel like with the remote learning, I feel like there's so many people that are remote out of fear for the virus and sending it to a family member. But then I also feel like now, as the year progresses, which upsets me, and I think which is making it so hard on us as a teacher, I feel like there's so many people that are taking advantage of the fact that they can be remote more than in person. I mean, that. I think when we initially started this year, we envisioned that half the class would be in one day, half the class would be in another day. But the way that it's come, as far as students are able to basically stay home whenever they want, we're finding we don't want to teach to the screen, but because we have, let's say, 4 people in person and then another 20 kids on the screen, it's like we have to teach to the screen. So I'm a little upset about that, and I know that's which is
it's
frustrating on the teachers end, and I see it from my colleagues, and I hear it from my colleagues that and you see it, that it's we're getting to a point where halfway through the year, and it's like, it feels like it's June.
Yes, and again, for those of us that teach those tactile subjects, those elective subjects, where it's so important to have them in front of you to work with them and help them out and watch what they're doing. It's a roller coaster. It really has been. It's just it still makes me feel like I have not been fully effective all year. I still feel like, and I'm always still feel like I am doomsday prepping. Like I'm waiting for that call where the governor or somebody's going to say everybody goes fully remote because it hasn't waned and
Yeah.
people still aren't taking precautions. And I'm putting together take home kits of things and trying to think, a month ahead from now. Are they going to have what they need if they're all stuck at home? And, that's for me personally, that's been the biggest challenge is
Yeah.
trying to,
Be
for
ready
lack of
for
a
the
better
next step.
term, yes, doomsday prep and figure out what the heck is going to happen if before February break we're all teaching from home again and everybody's home. So,
Yeah.
we'll have to see how that goes. I just want to give a quick shout out before we get to our episode to my buddy Nate Barton down in North Carolina for the new lid that he sent me in a recent artist swap. Nate
Looks
created
good.
this hat for me based on Hokusai's wave. It is giving me the vibe to get back to the beach, which I am missing greatly. Nate, thank you so much, my friend, for putting together this awesome hat for me, and we did a nice swap over the holiday break. It's been great to get to know him, and he's a fellow educator and artist down in Carolina. He's a big fan of the drop, so shout out to him. Our guest today, MK, holy cow,
Amazing guys. Yeah, great
unbelievable,
start to the new season. And
great
like you
start
said, it's season one we started off with Vic Lee, and now we have
in
Nathan Walsh,
London.
another
Another
artist.
UK
Yeah, another
member, yeah,
yeah,
over in Chester, Northern Wales. What an unbelievably intelligent and forthright and humble gentleman.
yeah.
Uh, we had the pleasure of seeing Nathan's work in person a number of years ago at one of the galleries where he's represented here in New York City, and we got to talk to him a lot about that. And we got an invitation to hang out with him the next time he's in the city. Hopefully, that's going to be
Yeah,
sooner
sooner than
rather than
later.
later.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that would be great. So strap in, enjoy the ride, ladies and gentlemen, because here we go, kicking off season 2, episode 25, Mr. Nathan Walsh on the drop.
I
And
know.
with us today on Monday, January 18th, Martin Luther King Jr. Day here in the United States. We are lucky enough to have with us the incredibly talented Mr. Nathan Walsh, all the way from Chester in Northern Wales across the Atlantic. MK, this is the second time now we've kicked off a season with someone from the UK.
Yeah, I guess we have to do that every time now,
I
next
think
season.
so. I think this is like tradition now. This is
It
awesome.
is.
And we're coming at you from a new time today, 12 noon. We've been lucky enough that MK and I are both off from work today, and it worked
Yep.
out perfectly because Nathan is 5 hours ahead, and so we weren't worried about having to interrupt his nightly routines. So it's great to have him with us. Nathan, thank you and welcome to the drop, my friend.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I've been looking forward to this, and
Good.
I hope your students get something worthwhile out of it. So
I think they will. We had a wonderful pre-check chat with Nathan earlier last week, and MK and I came away so excited to talk to him. We have both been huge fans of Nathan's work for a number of years. We've been lucky enough to see it in person as he has had representation here in New York City, which we're going to get to later on in the program. I have some questions for him about that. But I remember specifically, MK, when you and I were on one of our annual Chelsea gallery tour trips with our students, walking into one of the galleries and seeing Nathan's perspective paintings, which are, holy cow, unbelievably rendered.
Yeah, amazing,
I think
amazing
I
work.
think we talked about it for weeks after, and then we were lucky enough to find Nathan on Instagram, on social media, and as soon as I found him, I started following him immediately, and watching his progress has been just unbelievable to see. I mean, when we talk to the kids about using perspective and teaching them about perspective, and then you look at something that Nathan does, it just completely blows your mind with his approach to the work. And we're going to get to the work in a little while too. So Nathan, if you could for us, my friend, here in the drop, we love to start off every episode with our artist's origin story. Very much like our Marvel superheroes, because all of our artists are superheroes for us and our students. So give us a little bit of background. We know that you live currently in Northern Wales. Is that where you were originally from? And when you were growing up, at what point did art take hold for you as something serious?
Okay, well, I think I was at school, art was one of my chosen subjects. It was a sort of an option. I think you could do sort of art or drama or PE. So I chose to do art. I was sort of, I was lucky in the fact that my father was a photographer in the Royal Air Force, a reportage photographer. So, and he had in the house, there were some prints of Van Gogh, drawings. He was an avid reader, and he had lots of books on painters and drawing and that sort of thing. Although he hadn't studied it formally, I think he'd done some night classes or something like that. So there were sort of signs around the house of, you know, so that were kind of interesting to me. And I think, you know, that interest in art it wasn't dismissed. I wouldn't say it was encouraged, you know, as something to follow as a career, but it was something that was certainly there that could be discussed, and something that was exciting. So I did art at school. I wouldn't say I was a particularly good student. I was average. I was okay. I mean, I was pretty okay at most subjects. It was just one of those things I was okay at. But one sort of distinct memory I do have at school was there were a couple of other pupils who were much better than I was. Now, I was very aware that there was a certain guy, I won't mention any names, you know, just to protect the protections. And but there were a couple of guys who could, you know, would make beautiful paintings of trees or something or other, or self-portraits. And I thought, I'm not as good as those guys, and it sort of irked me a little. And I think, you know, it's not the best sort of aspect of my personality, but I'm certainly quite competitive. If I'm being totally honest, it's not something I like in myself, but it is there, and it got me a bit. I thought, you know, why can't I make things like that? You know, surely if I can sort of work at this, maybe I can improve and get to their sort of level. So I sort of went through school, and then sort of went to a sixth form college and did an advanced level in art. I would have been sort of 16 or 17. I don't know how that equates to your sort of level, where the study became more focused. And again, I really enjoyed it, but I didn't ever think about turning it into a potential career. From that point, I went to do a foundation course, which is the classic route in art education in the UK, where you would do a year where you build a portfolio of work which explores your particular interest, whether that's textile design, three-dimensional design, graphic design, or fine art. And I remember we were doing a life drawing class, and one of the tutors said, well, I think you should go into illustration or some sort of graphic art, Nathan, because you can draw really well. And if you go and do a degree in fine art, you're probably not going to do any drawing at all, certainly not from a life model, because things have changed. And I was a bit disappointed in that, but I didn't question his opinion, and I sort of went along with that and applied to do quite an open-ended degree course it was called graphic arts, but again, it carried on that sort of quite diagnostic approach where you could sort of dip into different things and try your hand at typography and, you know, illustration and animation and sort of self-initiated sort of painting projects. And I really enjoyed it. Again, I was again, I wasn't the greatest student. I was kind of an average student, but I was super keen.
Right.
I always worked really, really hard. I was a grafter as opposed to a student with bundles of talent. But I always felt that if I just kept at it, I mean, I sort of spent a heck of a lot of time, I remember in the library and sort of looking at books. And fortunately, we got the Tate Liverpool where I did my degree. And I was always going to shows, and sort of being able to see work up close was really, really important to me. So I sort of finished the degree. I did okay. I didn't have any great idea about turning it into a career or becoming an illustrator or an artist of any sort. I just sort of did it and enjoyed it. I mean, when I finished, I thought, well, what the heck am I going to do now? It's sort of like, well, I don't really have any skills per se. I don't have any now. It's like, well, I can do this, and I think I'm quite good at it. So I'll start submitting some paintings, these things that I've made. I don't know what they are. I don't know whether they're any good or not, but I'll submit them to some competitions. And I started getting work accepted into competitions. London's the kind of art capital in the United Kingdom. And there are a variety of quite sort of established groups, places like the New English Art Club and the British, the Royal Institute of Oil Painters and the Royal Academy and the Royal Society of Marine Painters, all these kind of various groups.
Right.
And I started submitting things to those shows, and the work started getting accepted. I went down to see these shows, and it was kind of quite exciting to go down, but nothing would ever sell, or there was never any return on it. And I wasn't so sure about it all. And I thought at that point, I started to think, well, I'm kind of making these things, and they looked a bit old hat in a way. They looked as if they were sort of harking back to an earlier period within art history, whether they were sort of, there was a bit of impressionism in there, there was a bit of sort of precisionist painting. And it was amongst another group of painters who were all doing similar things. There were kind of guys who were making things which looked like a bit like, I don't know, Andrew Wyeth or Winslow Homer, and it was all very sort of competent and nice, but I didn't really know what I was doing, and I wasn't entirely sure what these other people were doing either.
Right.
So anyway, I just carried on in this sort of aimless sort of way, making work. I started doing my own exhibitions local. I was sort of back there living in North Wales at this time, and started doing these sort of local shows, and the work started to sell. It was bringing in some sort of minimum income, which was quite encouraging. I felt quite good about myself. I thought, okay, people seem to like this, and I think the idea when someone buys a piece of work, they're kind of saying, well, we like this, keep going, keep doing this stuff. And so that was kind of good, but I wasn't really making a living. So I thought, well, what can I do? What else can I do with my time? So I thought, well, spoke to various people, and they said, oh, I think you'll make a good art teacher. So I went and did a sort of postgraduate certificate in education, which sort of qualifies you to sort of teaching sort of further education. So it was sort of post 16. Right. And I managed to pick up a bit of teaching, and then I landed a job actually on a foundation course in York, which is sort of towards the north of the country. Right. And that was kind of, that was exciting in a way, because all of a sudden I would have, teaching job was 3 days a week. So I had 3 days to teach, and the rest of my time I could paint. Right. I still didn't really know what I was doing, but and it was quite a trial by fire, really. I mean, I was young and naive. I didn't really have much experience as a teacher, so I was just I was winging it, really. But it was a really exciting environment in the fact that there were some really good teachers, and there were people who were really sort of passionate about their subjects, and I think I learned a lot from them. But I sort of got an idea that, I think I need to up the ante in terms of the painting. I need to get more serious about this. I need to really work out, what I'm doing. So I enrolled on a master's degree. I think it would be an MFA in America. Now, it was it was a tiny course, but I was very lucky in a way that the two guys running the course, one was called an artist called Steve Whitehead, and the other was called Clive Head. And they were both terrific realist painters, but they had quite a serious way about them, had quite sort of an academic sort of edge. And I thought, this is exactly what I need. I suppose in some ways that there could have been an argument to go away and study under somebody completely different, to challenge your beliefs in that way. But I thought, oh, hold on, these guys are great. I can learn from them. And so when I was teaching, I enrolled on this MA and did that for a couple of years. And I think the work really evolved in that time. One thing I will say, when I was teaching, I wasn't a great teacher, and it was a means to an end in a way that I knew I would get I'd get, I don't know, £800, £1,000 a month for doing this. Right. But it would allow me to sort of really concentrate on the painting. And I don't think I ever missed a day outside of my teaching. I was religious about making work. It didn't matter what sort of mood I was in, whether I wanted to do it, whether I could be bothered, or whether I had an exhibition. I just did it. I never missed a day. And that was, that was kind of, that's held me in good stead, that kind of workmanlike attitude.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Yeah.
I think that, I'm sorry, Nathan, just to cut you off real quick. I think that it's a great message right there for our kids, MK, about we've talked time and again about how showing up and just doing it is such an important part of the process. Sitting around and waiting for that quote unquote lightning bolt of inspiration is not necessarily always realistic. And that, Nathan, what you're saying is essentially just show up and do something and keep doing something until it clicks. Is that basically the message that you feel?
Yeah, I mean, I stayed in touch with some of the people I graduated with from my first degree, and some students who were far more talented than I was. And I noticed that lots of them had started to sort of drop off, or they weren't, focusing on the practice anymore. They'd given up, or they were just doing it in a really sort of minimal way, and hoping that some great opportunity would land on their doormat. And I just thought, well, I don't think that's going to happen. I just felt I've got to make things happen myself. I've got to sort of, if I can commit enough to this and commit to my sort of activity and consciously, be talking to other artists, be making use out of those two great tutors that I had, that I thought, well, that's got to stand me in good stead. If I've got something great to show someone eventually, then hopefully something will happen. But it's so easy to go and do something else. It's so easy to sort of take more days teaching, or so many other things well, not many other things I could have done, but it would have been easy to give up. There's always an opportunity to go and do something else that seems more fun at the time.
So let me ask you then, Nathan, what is it that drives you to continually show up in the studio and work, especially in the beginning? Because it sounds like, obviously you are not an overnight success. Your overnight success is actually decades worth of work.
For sure.
So what keeps you going to the studio day in and day out and just working? What is it about that environment that just keeps you inspired to do it? Where was your hope in all that?
Well, I suppose there were certain artists that I was looking at the time, aside from those two great tutors that I had. I was looking at people like Lopez Garcia, I don't know, Charles Sheila, Richard Estes. There was just scores of different artists who for one reason or another, or a multitude of reasons, were making or had made extraordinary things. And I just felt, well, what's to stop me from doing it? If I really sort of apply myself and work hard enough and think and apply what I've learned, I've got the same 24 hours in a day that everybody else has. So what's to stop me doing it? I mean, I was way off the mark at that point, but when I went into the studio or the bedroom or wherever I was working, I thought, well, there's a blank canvas here. I'll stretch something up. There's the potential here to make something incredible, that really sort of extends, the boundaries of realist painting, that does something original and unique, but still sort of builds on sort of, traditions and, that's sort of craft skills. It does something important. And I still feel the same way. I mean, I've got a sort of picture that's sort of ongoing behind me and one in front of me here. I still have the same excitement that I did, 20 years ago about, the potential that a painting might have. And sometimes it's just sort of, blind faith that I can make something that kind of raises the bar from what I've done before. And I think that's a real, driving force that I've got. I think I've made some quite good paintings. I haven't made many amazing things, or maybe I've made anything amazing, but I might. The next one might be. And I just think
it's that unknown that keeps you going.
That's what fires me up.
Yeah.
It's, I think it can be done. I sort of believe that, and I believe so many people have made extraordinary objects that, why can't I do the same?
I love that attitude, that why can't I attitude. It's just like, but I also like, it's why can't I, but you just don't assume that you could do it. It's always like, why can't I if I put work in? And I love that aspect about it.
Yeah. These all sound like cliches, but I suppose they're cliches because they're true. I know these things are true, to my experience. And, things are kind of hard for most professional artists, with lots of professionals at the moment. But I'm still sort of holding on to the fact that, I've still got this kind of object in front of me, and something good will happen. I think, if I make this thing, if I get this thing out there in the world somehow, that people will get behind it. I mean, I'm not one of these kind of characters who's sort of popular on social media. I mean, I hardly know how to use the thing, but I do have a small group of supporters who've kind of stuck with me since I started out 20 years ago. And most of those people can now no longer, afford the work, or if they've kind of changed their interests, or they haven't got any more walls to fill, they've become saturated with stuff. But that small group, you might only need a handful of supporters or collectors or curators or one significant dealer to change everything for you. So it's a question of sort of, getting it out there and sort of working with those people. And
Right. It's interesting that you bring that up, Nathan, because that's going to segue into another question I have for you. Looking at your social media and knowing your exhibition history, and we've looked at your website with your CV and your resume, and you strike me as what we would consider more of a quote unquote old school artistic approach, where gallery representation is important to you. Hands-on, in-person exhibitions are very important to you. Museum catalogs are very important to you. Where does that stand with you in such a digital world now, where we see so many of these artists going onto social media and bypassing the gallery system and using social media to just sell directly to their constituents and their collectors? Why has it been so important for you to maintain that gallery connection and that old school representation?
Well, I think first of all, when I sort of, maybe I'm doing something wrong, but when I get an image on my sort of phone and then sort of post it onto Instagram, all of a sudden the painting becomes a sort of this tiny sort of digital file, which bears very little relation to this kind of huge object that I've just spent 6 months making. So for me, it's been problematic in that people make assumptions on the work based on this image on their smartphone. So it's been sort of, for me, it's been critical that I've maintained a sort of real world, sort of career in the work that, in the way that people can walk into a gallery and see this physical object in front of them, and
it's almost like more respect for your work. It's like having respect for your work too. It's kind of interesting. No, you
mean,
don't want to show it. You're really thinking about the way that you want your work to be seen. You know.
yeah, I think now I might have sent it, I'd send sort of, JPEGs to sort of various people all the time. And that might pique their interest in something. It might think, oh, we might consider this guy for a group show, or oh, we might want to acquire this, we might not. But no one has ever really no one's ever bought a painting from a JPEG. No one's, because these can be quite expensive objects.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think being in front of the actual thing where, my work looks very photographic when it's been condensed down onto a small format. But when you're stood in front of one, and then you can get an idea that these things are all made up from sort of handmade marks, they have a sense of space, which is completely obliterated as soon as it becomes a JPEG. All these kind of interesting qualities, which I think makes me fairly reasonably unique, are lost in reproduction. So it's been good things happen when people see the actual paintings.
Yeah.
That's what I found. Obviously with the pandemic going on, those opportunities have become very, very limited, which is going to be it's a challenge for all of us, and it's going to be a challenge moving forward. But
does that concern you, Nathan? I was going to ask you that, like with everything that's going on right now, and that lack of the ability to see work in person, especially like MK and I, we discussed it just before we went on the air with you. We've had the luxury and the pleasure of seeing your work live in person here in New York through your representation in the galleries here. And we can both attest to the sheer scale and the painterly quality when you see it up close. And like you said, noticing the small marks, and like MK will tell you, I'm the guy with my nose pressed right up against it, and I'm
He's the guy you got to watch out for in the gallery.
Yeah, like, but I'm like, I want to taste it, I want to touch it, I want to smell it. Like it's an experience. Are you concerned moving forward that a lot of these galleries are going to move away from that in-person experience and just go online and do everything virtual?
Well, they're certainly trying it. I was in part of a digital, the digital version of Art Miami happened quite recently. So there's all these kind of various sort of wacky sort of, virtual reality viewing rooms and this, that, and the other. I'm not convinced. Well, they certainly don't seem to work for me. Whether they work for other people, I don't know. But it's definitely a concern. Moving forward, it certainly. It keeps me up at night. That sort of thing, because anything that's been positive, that's been good in my career, has been off the back of people being in front of a painting.
Yeah.
Right.
When I was sort of after I finished my master's degree, I thought, okay, well, I've got some reasonable stuff here. I need to get gallery representation. And at that time in my life, well, it was all about sort of photographing work, and you get sort of medium format slides made.
Right.
And you get these sort of packs of slides and sort of send them out to galleries, and then the gallery director or the assistant would pick it up and just throw it in the bin. And, that would be, that's what happened.
Right.
So it was a case then. I got the opportunity. Someone I know dropped out of a public space exhibition in Westminster in London, and offered me the chance to do it. So I thought, well, okay, I've got some work, I'll do it. And I saw that exhibition as a way of hopefully enticing a dealer or gallery representative to come and have a look at the work with the view to taking me on. I thought if I can get them there and they can see it, then I've got a fighting chance. And that's what happened. I think they did a reasonably good catalogue. I think 100 or so catalogues were sent out. They were all ignored. But I did get a couple of people to turn up to the show. I had a sort of a guy based in Zurich and a guy based in Mayfair who had a very sort of prominent gallery at the time. And they were both keen. And that's when things started to move in a very positive way. All of a sudden, the work started to sell. And for for decent, for good money for a young artist. And it was at that sort of point where I thought, well, I'm a cautious kind of character by nature. And I thought, well, I can carry on teaching. I'm not particularly passionate about it, if I'm being honest. Or I can take the risk and maybe I can look to reduce my hours, or maybe just get rid of the teaching job and just go for it. I was still, my early 30s, and I should have left before I actually went. It was weird in a way, because people were saying, why are you leaving this? It's a good job. And it was a good job, and I did enjoy it, but it wasn't where my passions really,
Right.
it wasn't what was getting me up in the morning and getting me fired up and excited. So it got to a point, I think I sold a painting for what was the equivalent of my annual salary. And I thought when I heard the news about that sale, I just thought, let's do it. Right, I've been messing around for far too long. It's just time to go for it, and we'll see what happens.
Right.
So that was the start of something. That was a different, certainly a very exciting, although it was also nerve-wracking, the idea of sort of, not getting that monthly check that I'd been dependent on for so long, for removing that safety net. And also what I didn't expect was when I started painting full time was all of a sudden I was on my own. And I had enjoyed the company of my colleagues. There were some fun, interesting people milling around the art college. But all of a sudden I was kind of on my own all day, every day, making these things. And that took a bit of getting used to. So there was the kind of that sort of social, that social element had been removed from my life, and the financial security had been removed. So it took a bit of getting used to.
I would imagine.
In some ways, though, I think that nervousness just made me work harder. I just got even more sort of driven about it. It's. I'm not saying that was healthy at all, but that's not what I did. I just worried myself into more activity.
Fear is a great motivator in some cases,
I
apparently.
think that's true.
Yeah. So Nathan, let's get to the process part of your work, because MK and I love to talk.
It's amazing.
And MK, I know you have images ready to go. Can we pull up something with? I mean, watching, and what I love about your social feed on Instagram, Nathan, is that you do post stages of your work. Like, we do see parts where you're just drawing and you do the initial planning and plotting things out, and then we see progress within the painting itself, and then we see the actual painting when it's completed. Can you walk us through? First of all, let's discuss your choice of subject matter. We know that you are can I say a photorealist landscape, urban scape kind of painter? Can we say that? How would you classify yourself?
I think I'm an urban landscape painter. I think I'm a realist painter. I'm certainly not a hardcore photorealist, but I think photorealism is an important element of what I do. It's something that's in the mix in terms of my painting language, part of it. But I prefer to be just seen as a realist. Of some sort. The work I make is based on our world. I'm not holding a mirror up to our world. It's not an exact replica of what's in front of us, nor is it an exact replica of photography. So,
right. And travel. This was my next question. Travel's been such an important part of your subject matter and finding that inspiration. How has this past year affected your current work with not being able to really go anywhere? Because you've traveled to the United States quite a bit, and you've done a lot of stuff around here in New York, and your landscapes are based off of a lot of the urban centers here in the city. How has that affected you right now? Like, what is it that you've been working on?
Well, to answer your question simply, I've just finished a gigantic sort of 11-foot wide painting that's taken up the past year. So I hadn't really thought about what's been
Travel.
going on.
So
Okay.
it caught you at a good time then, I guess.
Yeah.
I've just made this painting, and I thought, well, I'll finish this, and then I can worry about the fact I can't leave the house and go anywhere. But I think travel has been very important to me over the years. I think, and I enjoy sort of, you know, I live a pretty boring life. My sort of day-to-day routine is always the same. It's quite rare that I talk to anyone until my partner comes home from work. It's a solitary business, but to change that up, to go, whether I'm having an exhibition somewhere, or I feel like, I don't know, traveling to Paris, or going somewhere to start a new body of work, I think that's important. That's the contrast between that sort of almost monastic activity, and then going to somewhere like New York, where it's all kind of 24 hours, sort of absolute sort of chaos, sights and sounds, and, you know, being sociable at an exhibition opening, and, you know, talking to collectors and dealers and this, that, and the other. So that's quite a nice contrast. But the way I normally work pre-pandemic was, I mean, I've been coming to America for quite a few years, mainly because that's where my gallery representation was.
Right.
But the way I would normally work would be to sort of wander around a city, and just not with a sort of particular sort of plan of action in mind. It would just be more of a case of just wandering about, normally on foot, and just sort of seeing what was there. So I wouldn't want a predetermined idea of a painting before I went. I would sort of have to go and just find something which had some sort of visual potential. Now, from that point, I would sort of, you know, I'd find a spot. I mean, a year or so ago, I made a painting on the sort of Hudson Yards development, which is probably part of that Instagram feed. And so I photographed the area extensively. Again, I'm not a particularly good photographer, but I can take images. I work with a small sort of A6 sized sketchbook, and I make sort of tiny sort of scribbles. There's something kind of important about those, although they're sort of not accurate in any way. There's something which links those drawings to a particular time, a particular place, which is helpful when I return to the UK. I start to sift through those images and sort of thumbnail drawings, and then sort of think about how these things can be put together into some sort of compositional idea. So from that point, what I tend to do is make a series of sort of postcard-sized drawings, which are sort of composites of those photographs and drawings. Yeah, that's the sort of thing. They're kind of scruffy things, but they serve a purpose.
Yeah.
I'll make lots of these. They're just on sort of tracing paper. They're not made to be exhibited. They're not sort of pretty. They're sort of rough and ready things to think about. They get placed on the studio wall, and most of them get rejected, but they're around me while I'm working on a current painting. So I can think about, well, this one has got potential, or that one isn't going to work, or that one's derivative, or I can do better than that, or, you know, that for whatever reason they get thrown away. Because I might only make 2 paintings a year. If they're large, then, you know, unfortunately, there's no way around this. The sort of work that I make is very labor intensive. Yeah. So the compositions that I choose, they've got to be the most exciting ones. They've got to be the most ambitious, the most complex. They've got to have something there which I think is, again, going back to that idea of raising the bar, of extending what I can do. So, so from that point, I'll have some sort of one of these sort of tiny drawings, and the way I work is it's very sort of I suppose to a certain extent it's quite old-fashioned. This is where the work begins to sort of deviate from the sort of photorealist approach. I I build everything from scratch. I start off with it's just one horizon line, and I start to plot building. Well, they're not buildings. They start off as just lines and squares, rectangles, triangles, and then I start to sort of, each sort of object or pictorial element will have its own vanishing point. So it's kind of like it's an extension of sort of 2-point perspective. Generally,
Yes.
there are other paintings that I've made which are quite different in nature, but instead of there being 2 points, each pictorial element, whether it's a building, tree, person, car, will have its own vanishing point. So you will have hundreds of these little X marks along the horizon line. Now, what that does, it helps me establish an object in a sort of constructed space, which is divorced from the reference material, from the photograph.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden they have their own, they've got their own sort of, they have their own presence, they have their own identity.
Right.
Now, that's where I start. So they're simple shapes, and the thing, by doing this, it allows me to change their position easily. I can change their height, I can take things out. So it's quite a sort of fluid, open-ended, process in a way. I think that's probably the most creative aspect of what I do. Things change an awful lot in that time period. Now, for a large painting, the drawing stage might take a month. So there's lots of sort of, rubbings out, trying things, putting them back in, taking them out. Now, it looks quite complicated when you see a finished drawing, like some of the things I posted on Instagram. But they start off very, very simply. It's just simple shapes that are broken down and subdivided, and they look quite interesting. I often think the drawings look better than the paintings online.
They're beautiful on their own, for sure. They're beautiful.
Why didn't you bother painting that?
But I think, Nathan, what is such a refreshing thing to see from an artist of your caliber is how you've embraced that basic foundational knowledge that we give the students at school who are always, we always do perspective units. We always do units about observational drawing, and they always hem and haw and complain and wonder why they have to do it just like this and like that and like this. But to hear someone who is so accomplished and has taken this approach to such a different level and made it their own and made it so unique, and to hear your editing process and how you take things out and put things back and move things around, I don't think that they understand that how important that basic knowledge is to get to that next level. Is that always how you've approached putting these things together? It's kind of like trying to build a house without putting the basement foundation in, basically, right?
That's the thing. It's quite simple, really, but it looks complicated. I'm not following a textbook approach to perspective. I'm sort of making it up as I go along. I'm going to sort of, I will have picked things from other artists, and I've learned things from different sources. And each painting that I make, they're never made the same way. There's been ones recently where there's been more than one horizon line, so you can start to look down into a space and look up at the same time. And I think that's kind of quite exciting. The fact that things change quite quickly, and I think you sort of make a change, then the painting the drawing at that point will lead you down a different route. So things that's something which is that's very exciting. That's part of it.
Does it ever get to the point, Nathan, where it gets too complicated, where you're looking at too many things and the visual elements are too overstimulating? You have to take a step back and say, well, that's too much. I got to pull something out of there.
Well, I don't know. I think I'm drawn to complexity. I mean, I think the most recent larger paintings, there's one called the Mandarin Oriental that I've just finished, the one of Hudson Yards. There was an earlier one called Transamerica, which is quite exciting, where you're dealing with what's in front of the viewer, but also dealing with the information that's sort of that's reflected, that's sort of in an inside space, an outside space, and also information that's reflected on the glass you might be looking through. So they become a real sort of mishmash of things, of elements in a way. But I think some people don't like it. It's kind of a bit off-putting that you put all these kind of different things in. But for me, I think complexity is something that I'm drawn to. I mean, it can't be a sort of an all-over complexity, so you end up with something which looks like wallpaper. You've got to have elements of calm and serenity amongst those pockets of detail or information or stuff. So it's that's a challenge. But again, it goes back to the idea that, I mean, I've started a new painting behind me that I'll share quite quickly, which is it's the first thing I've done where it's a composite of two different cities.
Really?
So,
Wow.
Well, I've started doing things with reflected material, and I thought, well, who's to say what's reflected onto this glass window? It could be anything. So I thought, well, okay, let's do something which really kind of challenges the idea of a literal realist painting. So we've got elements of Chicago mixed in with elements of San Francisco.
Oh, that's cool.
It becomes almost like a dreamlike space. It's still built on those kind of solid foundations of sort of plotting vanishing points and constructing a space that is hopefully still convincing. It has its own sort of reality, I think, which is independent from photography and drawing.
Right.
But it becomes its own thing. So, and obviously this place doesn't exist.
Right.
But I would hope that a viewer can enter into that world and feel that there's a reality, there's a sort of reality to it.
Yeah, I feel like, Nathan, that you would share a kinship. I don't know if you're familiar with the work of British painter Patrick Hughes. Do you know Patrick Hughes?
Oh, yeah.
And his take on perspective and playing with perspective. I feel like that's kind of where your work is headed, where you're kind of taking this idea of what we think we know and what we see and turning it on its head and making it something completely unique and original. Is that kind of the goal that you see yourself going?
Yeah, I think that is the goal. I think it's going to take a bit of working out, and sometimes my sort of thinking is ahead of what I can actually do. It might take 3 or 4 paintings before I can, fully realize what I'm talking about.
Right.
The next one might not be the painting. It might not sort of lock together. It might not sort of work together, those different elements, as harmoniously as I can. But give it a few paintings, then hopefully I'll have ironed out those issues. So I think, absolutely. I want to do something which is, I sort of love all different sorts of painting. Where it doesn't have to be sort of, realist at all. I think it's, a sort of a painting by, I don't know, Antonio Tapies can be just as sort of convincing as presenting a sort of, an alternate reality. There's something incredibly concrete, about his work that's compared to, I don't know, Lopez Garcia or whoever.
Right.
So it's if that makes sense.
It does. It's to me, Nathan, it sounds like you are trying to create your own visual language through this use of perspective, which I find fascinating, because perspective, right, MK? Perspective is so grounded in rules and what we know about perspective and how it works. And when we teach perspective, it's always about those foundational elements of, well, here's your horizon line, here's your vanishing point, here's multiple vanishing points, but these can only go to this vanishing point because this angle won't read as realistic and whatever have you. But what impresses me so much about what you do, Nathan, is that you take all of those basic, like, let's say that for example, the original perspective rules are Latin, and you're building off of those root words and creating a whole new language of
Pushing it to another
perspective
level. Yeah.
and pushing it to another level. Yeah.
Look, so I think it's important that, well, for me at least in the studio, that that I don't sort of accept things as given. That it has to be done a certain way. It's up to me to sort of accept certain things, but then reject others. And it means that each work becomes quite speculative in nature. It doesn't mean they're going to sort of work per se. So it's really a question of making it up as you go along, and hopefully you'll get it to sort of work in a certain way.
And I think that's what separates it from what makes it art and not, let's say, technical drawing. Technical drawing would be much, like you said, Tom, like rooted strictly in the rules of perspective. But you're like taking the rules of perspective and spinning them on their own.
And yet it still has that draftsman-like quality, especially at the beginning, which is so impressive, because then he's able to take that to another level and make it into a fine art painterly approach, where he's almost synthesizing these two different ideas. Nathan, could we say that that's kind of the goal of what you're doing also?
I think that's fair. I mean, it's important to understand for me that perspective is just a system that I can use and exploit and manipulate. But I don't have to follow any set agenda or set series of rules. It's in the same way that you mentioned you've been up close to see my paintings. You've got an idea of their sort of textures and their physicality.
Yeah.
The same way that I use photography, but my work isn't about duplicating photography in any way. That's why I don't see myself as a photorealist, although I've been aligned with that movement. It's photography can be used, and I do use it, but it's just kind of part of the ingredient to my mixture of things that are going on. And all these different systems of ways of describing the world. I mean, for me, the problem with photography is, well, the great thing about it is that it provides you a lot of information. You can use a lot of raw material quickly. The major problem with it is it tends to be flat. And painting, the history of painting is about, a lot of it's the history of describing space. So where does that leave you with a sort of an utterly flat two-dimensional image? There's an instant problem.
Right.
So my sort of feeling was, and don't get me wrong, I admire so many of those sort of photorealist painters, and from the first generation onwards to the guys, I don't know, Rod Penner and Davis Cohn.
Oh, Rod Penner. Yeah.
It's just extraordinary stuff. They're just fantastic painters. But I think what I'm trying to do, for me, there's no point in me trying to become another sort of Bertrand Manil or one of these guys, even closer to the photograph, and it's pointless because they're doing what they do, and it's great. But for me, I thought, well, there's an opportunity here to. What happens if I reintroduce mark making? What about if I sort of have, complex layering of paint, from sort of thinly diluted areas of paint to sort of thicker pastos, isn't that going to sort of introduce a whole richer language to what's going on within photorealism? Right. And I think some people, got behind that, and that's great. So
for sure.
It was a conscious decision where I thought, I was looking at stuff and think, well, what if we take this a different route and do something different with it and see what happens?
I love that, MK. I love that message of not working in a vacuum. Like, Nathan understands what else is out there, and he's actively picking and choosing what he wants to take from what he's seen from other people and making it into something of his own, which I think his great approach to that, it's what keeps him so fresh and so relevant in terms of what he's doing.
That's also what drives art forward too. That's that we're not doing what the people next to us are doing.
Exactly.
I mean, at the same time, I sometimes think that the concept of originality is can be overplayed, in that you don't have to be completely different to the guy next to you in a show, but I think you have to be different enough. I mean, I
Yeah.
think one of my great influences, Canaletto, I think his nephew, Bernardo Bellotto, he was not as good a painter, but he was different enough to be recognised in his own right. So I think that's something to think about. That you don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's just, can you sort of push it in your own direction?
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, that's great.
It's uniquely yours. That when someone goes into a show or even sees it on Instagram, say, that's this guy. It can only be a Nathan Walsh painting, because that's and I think that's developing and sort of building your own personal visual language. I think is key to sort of moving forward and getting people to spot you, to notice you.
Right.
So speaking of seeing a Nathan Walsh, can we get a peek at that piece behind you there, Nathan, and see what it is you're currently working on?
Yeah, so this is the one where it's a sort of composite of bits of San Francisco, bits of Chicago. We're looking through a sort of a revolving door, so we can sort of see through it, but we've also got these things which are reflected on the glass of the door.
Right.
It might be a complete mess. I don't know. Don't know. I don't know where it's going, and I think that's quite exciting. I mean, it's also quite nerve-wracking. This isn't an obvious solution to a problem. It's trying something. Let's see where it goes.
Yeah, I think that's just, it's a great message, Nathan, for our students too, to be fearless and not worry about necessarily the end result.
Yeah, because they always want to know that. They always want, they want to see exactly what the painting is going to look at like before they do it. That's it. Right. They always want to. Yes. It's also that age group too.
Right. But if it doesn't meet that expectation in their head, it's an immediate failure. For sure. It's an immediate failure. If they even get to the end of it. Because a lot of them will reach that frustration halfway through and then pitch it.
Or even say, like Nathan said, like not knowing what the end result is going to look like. They can't deal with that, and then I always say, like, these paintings, you have the idea, then there's an awkward stage. It's that middle stage where they don't know whether or not they could even bring it to the point that they want, that they bail on the piece too.
Right. Yeah. Right. Do you ever feel that way, Nathan, where you're almost to the point where you almost pitch it and leave it?
There's a couple of paintings I wish I had have stopped, and I wish I had thrown them away and done something else with them. But I think that's the same for a lot of artists. I think we can be overly critical of our previous work. It also, doing something like this, which is going down a different path, which is sort of moving things on from the previous work. It does bring into sort of play the idea of, okay, well, if I change things up, how are people going to respond to this? The people who kind of like maybe the more sort of literal scenes. I don't know. It's that's a worry, because ultimately, I survive. I paint full time. I don't do anything else. I survive on the generosity of my supporters, my collectors, and so it's a worry. Sometimes you think, well, okay, well, I push this. I'm excited by this. Is anyone else going to be? I don't know.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, the problem is, I could carry on making, very well-made conservative views of Paris and London and New York, and I'm sure that there will always be a market for that sort of thing. But I think I kind of want more out of this, and it goes back to that idea of sort of starting, in the studio, sort of 7:30 in the morning, and being fired up about what I can do. I would, you see a lot of artists who make the same painting again and again and again, and it's not for me. All my sort of artistic heroes were were always trying to push themselves and reinvent what they were doing.
And that creates longevity too. It's like you see that in music too. It's like one group has that hit song, and then their next song that they try to produce is trying to duplicate that next hit. But it's the
Mm.
artists that realize that they have to push themselves forward, try different things that have that longevity
Right,
in their career.
right, absolutely. I think that
Hopefully.
yeah, but I think, Nathan, that what the commonality in what you're doing is the sheer talent that you portray in the work. It's the craftsmanship. It's that level of knowledge that we can see in the work, right, MK? I think
Yeah.
that it's always going to be a Nathan Walsh. Like you said, when you walk in, we know what a Nathan Walsh looks like, regardless of what avenue you're pushing it and what, you know, what level you're trying to take it to, because I think that there is such a an overwhelming sense of draftsmanship and knowledge and technique that just screams out of every piece. And I don't think you'll ever lose that, no matter what the subject matter turn takes for you.
Well, I suppose when I'm taking a new direction, it's about building on what I've done before. It's not rejecting everything. It's not kind of
Building, yeah.
you know, yes, I'm taking, you know, there are changes that are happening from the last painting, but I'm not throwing everything away. You know, this is something new which builds on the previous work.
Right.
So,
Right. Which is such an irony, because he's doing buildings and he's
Yeah.
building off of prior knowledge of buildings, which is just fantastic.
Yeah.
MK, we are well over an hour on our first episode
I
of
know,
season
unreal. I know. But
I
I gotta know
I
one
could
more thing though. I gotta know about how you ended up in the church.
well, well, I decided to sort of come back, you know, after I finished my teaching job in York. I sort of, I've been painting for about 10 years or so. And this place came up on the market, and I could just about afford it. And my parents they're still quite close by. It came up, and I thought, this place is for me. I just thought it had this sort of double height space at the back. We'll have to send you an image with the sort of light coming through the stained glass window.
Yeah.
And I just thought, this place is for me. There's this sort of sense of, first of all, double height space means I can make big paintings. I can get them in and out reasonably well. But there's nothing much goes on around me. There's a sense of sort of stillness and quiet here, which really appealed. But when I did the viewing on the property, I just thought, well, this is great. I had this kind of emotional reaction to it, but I didn't think about how am I going to heat this place, or where am I going to sleep, and all this sort of
Yeah.
stuff.
So how do you have it set up? Is it like, you know, is it basically like a studio, like a not a studio, an art studio, but like an open space where you have your
it's sort of when I bought it, it'd been sort of partly converted, so there were sort of walls in place. So it's been a case of just trying to improve what had been done before. So there's a kitchen area beyond this, and there's a front room, and the sort of the bedrooms are upstairs. It's been fun, but it's expensive. It's going to be a lifelong project, you know, and a labour of love, really. But I think that I've kind of filled it with things which are, you know, inspiring to me. You know, I'm an avid collector of knickknacks and kind of stuff, you know, other artists' work and bits of sculpture and books. I mean, books are a terrible weakness of mine. When I was an art student, I used to spend my student grant going around all the sort of secondhand bookshops and picking up bargains, and you know, that stayed with me. You know, now a chapel full of books, which but I constantly refer to these things. You know, it's it's part of me, and it's all kind of part of this activity. These things are sort of, how do they function as signs or reminders or something that all sort of, you know, all becomes part of this activity one way or another.
Wow.
Unbelievable. I could talk to this gentleman all day long, MK. He's just
Absolutely.
a wealth of knowledge. I mean, it's been a pleasure. Nathan, Thank
It's
you
been a
so
pleasure.
much.
Really, thank you. Thanks
It's
for
been
inviting me.
it is our pleasure for sure. Going from seeing your work in person to getting to know you and then to being able to interview you like this has been such a great thing for MK and I to kick off season 2. I think
Great.
we couldn't have found a better person to start off this
No,
season with
absolutely
MK.
not. Yeah.
What a great thing. Everybody who's tuning in, let's keep this train rolling, man. It's a new year. We're hoping for good things. I know there's still a lot going on, but we're starting to see some good things happening.
Yeah, definitely.
And hopefully this is one of those things. So Nathan, again, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you so much.
Yeah,
my
thank
friend,
you
for
so much,
joining in.
Nathan.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
It's been a great time, and like we say at the end of every episode, it hasn't changed in season 2. MK, keep looking out for one another, keep loving one another, keep taking care of one another. We need each other more now than ever, folks. Thanks again for tuning in. Season 2, episode 25 in the books. Next time around, we will see you again. Peace out. Thanks for joining in.